110 million years ago, in what is now the Sahara Desert, then a vast river delta of dense jungle and warm waterways, something was waiting. Not hiding, not sleeping, waiting. It had been doing this for 50 years, and it would do it for another decade still. 36 feet long, 8 tons of muscle and bone, a skull longer than a grown man is tall, 132 teeth that never stopped growing. It had watched dinosaurs walk to this river to drink every day of its life, and it was not afraid of any of them. The saltwater crocodile is the largest reptile alive today, 23 feet long, 4,400 pounds, the most powerful bite force of any living animal. Present on Earth in roughly this form for over 80 million years. People are terrified of it, correctly. Now imagine something built on the same blueprint, but 3 times heavier, with a skull you could sleep inside, with eyes positioned on top of its head, specifically so it could hide its entire body underwater while watching the riverbank above. An animal so large that even the apex predators of the Cretaceous period, the carnivorous dinosaurs that ruled every ecosystem on land, had to think twice about approaching the water's edge. The questions this video is going to answer are these. What exactly was Sarcosuchus, and how do we know how big it really was? What world did it live in, and what did it share that world with? Did it actually hunt dinosaurs, or is that a story we tell because it sounds better than the truth? And why, after 100 million years of crocodilian dominance on this planet, does the modern crocodile look so similar to an animal that lived before the first flower ever bloomed?
The Sahara Desert is the largest hot desert on Earth, nearly the size of the continental United States, a landscape of sand, rock, and heat so extreme that it feels incompatible with life. It was not always this way. 110 million years ago, the region that is now northern Niger was a subtropical river delta, warm, wet, densely forested, threaded with wide, slow-moving rivers and flooded plains. A world that looked, in many ways, like the Amazon basin does today. In 1946, French paleontologist Albert Félix de Lapparent was working in the Sahara when his team recovered something unusual, fragments of bone and teeth too large to belong to any animal he recognized. The specimens were logged, labeled, and largely set aside. The Second World War had just ended. Resources were scarce. The fragments waited. It wasn't until 1966 that French paleontologists Frantz de Bruyne and Philippe Taquet formally described the material and gave it a name.
Sarcosuchus imperator, flesh crocodile emperor. The name was accurate, but the full picture wouldn't emerge for decades. In 1997 and 2000, American paleontologist Paul Sereno led expeditions into Niger's Tenere Desert, funded by the National Geographic Society. What his team recovered from the El Raz Formation changed everything. Multiple specimens, partial skulls, vertebrae, armored skin plates called osteoderms, each one larger than a dinner plate, and one specimen preserved to nearly 50% completion, enough to reconstruct the animal with genuine confidence for the first time. The skull alone measured 5.5 feet in length. Sereno's team ran the numbers against modern crocodilian scaling equations, comparing skull proportions to body length ratios across living species. The result was an animal between 33 and 36 feet long, with the largest, oldest individuals potentially approaching 40 feet and weighing somewhere between 9,000 and 17,000 pounds. The nickname that National Geographic gave it in their 2001 documentary was blunt and accurate: SuperCroc. But a name and a size don't tell you what an animal actually was. To understand Sarcosuchus, how it lived, what it ate, how it moved, you have to understand the world it was built for. And that world was stranger than almost anything alive today. 110 million years ago, the African continent looked nothing like it does today. The supercontinent Gondwana was still in the process of breaking apart. What would become Africa, South America, India, and Antarctica were only just beginning to separate. The Atlantic Ocean was a narrow seaway, still opening. The climate across the tropics was warmer and wetter than today, a greenhouse world with no permanent ice caps. And the Niger Delta was one of the richest river ecosystems on the planet. Wide, slow-moving rivers connected to vast floodplains that filled seasonally. Dense forests of ancient conifers and ferns lined the banks. Flowering plants were still new and relatively rare. The water was warm, brown with sediment, thick with fish. This is the environment that produced Sarcosuchus. And to understand why it grew so large, you have to understand one fundamental fact about crocodilian biology. Crocodilians never stop growing.
Unlike most animals, which reach a genetically determined adult size and stop, crocodilians continue adding mass throughout their lives. The older the animal, the larger it gets. Growth slows with age, but it never stops entirely. Growth rings in Sarcosuchus osteoderms, the bony plates embedded in its skin, indicate it lived for approximately 50 to 60 years, and it kept growing throughout that entire lifespan. The largest Sarcosuchus individuals weren't just well-fed, they were old. Decades of continuous growth, in a warm environment that kept their metabolism running efficiently, produced an animal that modern crocodilians simply cannot match because they don't live long enough or in warm enough conditions to reach comparable size. The river ecosystem that Sarcosuchus inhabited was not empty. Enormous fish, some themselves reaching 10 feet in length, filled the waterways. Giant lungfish, primitive sharks adapted to fresh water, turtles with shells wider than a car door.
And on the banks and in the shallows, dinosaurs. The Elraz Formation has produced an extraordinary diversity of Cretaceous life. Uranosaurus, a large plant-eating dinosaur with a sail on its back. Nigersaurus, a sauropod with a jaw like a lawnmower, designed for grazing on low vegetation near the waterline. Lurdosaurus, a heavy, semi-aquatic herbivore that may have spent significant time in the same rivers as Sarcosuchus. And predators. Suchomimus, a large theropod with a long, narrow snout and hooked claws built for fishing. Cryptops, a heavily armored carnivore, animals at the top of the terrestrial food chain. All of them shared their world with Sarcosuchus. All of them came to the river. Which brings us to the question everyone actually wants answered. We know what lived alongside Sarcosuchus. We know the dinosaurs came to the water. But what happened when they did? And how much of what we think we know about SuperCroc's diet is actually supported by evidence? Here is where the story of Sarcosuchus requires some honesty. The image most people carry of SuperCroc is of an animal that routinely hunted and killed large dinosaurs, a river monster that dragged full-grown sauropods beneath the surface. The reality is more nuanced, and in some ways, more interesting. Sarcosuchus had a long, narrow snout with conical teeth, a structure that strongly indicates adaptation for seizing aquatic prey. This is the same snout shape seen in fish-eating specialists across the crocodilian family, the gharial of India, the false gharial of Southeast Asia, long and narrow for quick lateral strikes through water to catch fish. A skull built for crushing large terrestrial prey would look different, broader, more heavily reinforced at the rear, with blunter teeth designed for bone crushing rather than gripping. So was Sarcosuchus primarily a fish eater? Almost certainly, fish made up the majority of its diet.
The rivers of the Elraz Formation were full of them. Large, abundant, and far easier to catch than a dinosaur. But here's what the biology also tells us. Sarcosuchus had a substantial overbite, and the enlarged, bulbous end of its snout sheltered a huge cavity that may have given it an enhanced sense of smell and an unusual call. Its eye sockets were tilted upward, which helped it conceal its enormous body underwater while scanning the river's edge above. Eyes tilted upward to watch a riverbank. An enhanced sense of smell. A body designed for complete concealment beneath the water surface. This is not an animal that only thought about fish. Modern saltwater and Nile crocodiles are primarily fish eaters as juveniles. As they grow larger and more powerful, they begin taking larger and larger prey, eventually capable of killing buffalo, hippos, and in rare cases, even small elephants that venture too close to the water.
The same scaling principle almost certainly applied to Sarcosuchus. A young Sarcosuchus ate fish. An adult of several tons ate larger fish and opportunistic prey at the waterline. A fully grown senior individual, 8 tons, 50 years old with a skull 5.5 feet long, was capable of taking almost anything that came within range. Although it's unlikely that Sarcosuchus deliberately hunted dinosaurs for lunch, there's no reason it had to tolerate other predators that competed with it for limited food resources. A full-grown SuperCroc would have been more than capable of taking on any challenger. A Nigersaurus wading into shallow water to drink. A juvenile sauropod crossing a river. A Suchomimus fishing from the bank. None of these animals were safe near a river that contained an 8-ton ambush predator with 132 teeth and the patience to wait for days without moving.
But the most remarkable thing about Sarcosuchus isn't its size, or its teeth, or what it ate. It's the fact that something remarkably similar to it is still alive today. And understanding why the crocodilian body plan has persisted for over 200 million years is one of the most fascinating questions in all of evolutionary biology. The first true crocodilians appeared approximately 83 million years ago. Their ancestors, the broader group called crocodiliforms, go back over 200 million years to the Triassic period. They have survived every mass extinction event in that time. the end Triassic extinction that killed most large reptiles, the end Cretaceous asteroid impact that eliminated the non-avian dinosaurs, the cooling of the Paleocene that killed Titanoboa. Every time the world reset, the crocodilians were still there. The reason is not complicated. The crocodilian body plan is one of the most efficient survival strategies evolution has ever produced, and it has required almost no modification in 200 million years because it was essentially correct the first time. Consider what a crocodile actually is biologically. A metabolism that can shut down to near zero during food scarcity, allowing survival for months or even over a year without eating.
A heart with a 4-chambered structure that can redirect blood flow to optimize oxygen use during dives. Skin reinforced with bony osteoderms that function as external armor. Teeth that are continuously replaced throughout life, meaning it never runs out. Senses calibrated for ambush predation in murky water. Pressure sensors along the jaw that detect the movement of prey through water. Eyes designed for low-light vision. Nostrils that can seal completely underwater. And perhaps most importantly, a growth strategy that produces larger and more powerful animals the longer they survive. Age is not a disadvantage for a crocodilian. Age is the advantage. Sarcosuchus was not an aberration. It was not an evolutionary accident that grew too large and paid the price. It was the crocodilian design taken to its logical extreme, in an environment warm enough, rich enough, and stable enough to allow an animal to keep growing for 6 decades without interruption. The Cretaceous Niger Delta provided everything the blueprint required. Warm water for metabolism, abundant prey for growth, a stable climate maintained for millions of years. Remove those conditions, cool the climate, reduce the prey base, destabilize the ecosystem, and the giant crocodilians shrink back to manageable sizes. Which is exactly what happened. When the asteroid struck 66 million years ago and the Cretaceous world collapsed, the giant crocodilians disappeared, along with everything else that depended on that specific environment. What survived were the smaller, more flexible generalists, animals that could tolerate a wider range of conditions, eat a wider range of prey, and wait out the darkness that followed the impact. Their descendants are the saltwater crocodiles, the Nile crocodiles, the American alligators of today. Smaller than Sarcosuchus, but built on the exact same blueprint. Still waiting in rivers, still watching the bank, still patient.
Which raises one final question. The one that connects a 110 million year old fossil in the Sahara Desert to something happening in rivers right now. Because the crocodilians' extraordinary resilience across 200 million years may be telling us something important about what makes a body plan truly successful, and what that means for the future. A saltwater crocodile hatching from its egg today is, in most meaningful biological ways, the same animal that shared rivers with Sarcosuchus 110 million years ago. The DNA has changed, the exact species has changed, but the fundamental architecture, the ambush body, the armored skin, the replaced teeth, the patient metabolism, the upward tilted eyes, is unchanged. 200 million years of asteroid impacts, ice ages, continental drift, and mass extinctions, and the crocodilian said, no change is needed. This is extraordinarily rare in evolutionary history. Most successful lineages diversify, branching into dozens or hundreds of ecological niches over geological time, generating enormous variation as different populations adapt to different environments. Crocodilians did something different. They found one strategy and held it, defended it against every ecological disruption the planet could produce, and are still holding it today.
There are 27 living crocodilian species today, distributed across tropical and subtropical regions of every continent except Antarctica and Europe. None of them are endangered by biological inadequacy. Every threat to their survival comes from outside their own biology. Habitat destruction, hunting, pollution, climate change affecting nesting temperatures. The crocodilian itself has never been the problem. The crocodilian works perfectly. It always has. Sarcosuchus is the proof of what that design can become when the conditions are right. An 8-ton ambush predator with a skull you could sleep inside, waiting in a prehistoric river for a dinosaur to make a mistake. It is gone now, but its blueprint is not. And that brings us to the last part of this story, which isn't about Sarcosuchus at all. It's about what it took to find it, and what the Sahara Desert, of all places, is still hiding. Paul Sereno's 2000 expedition into Niger didn't just find Sarcosuchus. It found an ecosystem. From the same Elraz formation, Sereno's team recovered the remains of 6 previously unknown dinosaur species, 3 new crocodilian species, new fish, new turtles. An entire lost world, preserved in rock in the middle of a desert that receives less than an inch of rain per year. The Sahara is one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth for paleontological fieldwork. Extreme heat, shifting sands, political instability in the region, logistical challenges that make every expedition enormously expensive and difficult. And yet, every expedition that has managed to work there has found things that rewrite textbooks. The fossil remains of Sarcosuchus imperator were uncovered in the Elraz Formation of Niger and described in detail in the early 2000s by Paul Sereno and his team, revealing one of the largest crocodilian species ever to exist, dating back 112 million years. That was from one expedition with limited time and resources. The formation extends for hundreds of square miles. Most of it has never been excavated. There is a version of this story where Sarcosuchus is not the largest crocodilian that ever lived. We have recovered partial specimens, skull fragments, osteoderms, vertebrae. The most complete individual is still only about 50% intact. We are estimating size from incomplete evidence using equations derived from modern crocodilians, animals that are themselves much smaller. The margins of error on these calculations are significant. It is entirely possible, not certain, but possible, that the largest Sarcosuchus individuals exceeded everything current estimates suggest. That somewhere in the Tenere Desert, under meters of sand and rock, the remains of a truly colossal animal are waiting. We simply haven't found them yet. 110 million years ago, an animal the length of a city bus waded in a warm river in what is now the largest desert on Earth. It waited for 50 years, growing larger each decade, watching the bank with eyes designed specifically to see without being seen. Dinosaurs came to drink. Some of them didn't leave. The river is gone now. The jungle is gone. The dinosaurs are gone. The climate that made Sarcosuchus possible is gone. What remains are fragments, a skull here, a tooth there, an osteoderm pressed into sandstone under meters of desert. And from those fragments, Paul Sereno's team reconstructed enough of the picture that we can stand in a museum and look up at a skull 5.5 feet long and understand, in our bones, that the world was not always the way it is now. That there were rivers here, that something was waiting in them, and that whatever came to the water had to be very, very careful.